making sure that we're actually delivering on the experience that the customer is looking for, and also that we're intending to deliver. So this might sound like business 101, and if you're in a lot of other industries, it probably is. But in financial services, and this is true of both banking and insurance, this is not how we have approached our customers in the past. You know, we have tended to orient ourselves around the products that we want to sell and the way that we want to sell them in the marketplace. And if you look at the way that we're organised, we are not really organised around our customers. So as we talk about really delivering customer experience and thinking about how the industry needs to transform, you know, this is a really huge theme for us. So we really need to turn on its head the way that we approach our business going forward, and certainly what we do next, so that we're more organised not around our products but more around our customers, and that we're considering what the client's needs are first before we then think about how we might be able to support them, whether that's with products or with advice, etc. That also means making smart partnerships. And what I mean by that is recognising where, when we partner with others, the power of what we can do together is much greater than what we can do on our own. Partnering together as companies, and ultimately, I think this is what the industry really needs to do to be truly customer-centric. So that brings me quite neatly into the second theme I want to talk about, which is about strategic partnerships, and probably the third buzzword, which is fintech. So it's really going beyond our current capabilities. We all hear about the pace of change and the sheer kind of volume of disruption that's happening, and the particularly technology advances is massive. But the reality is that the world that we're operating in and our clients are operating in is becoming even more complex, and I think financial services companies have the opportunity to take the lead in demonstrating that actually putting the power of what we can do together, either with brokers like Aon and insurers like AIG, so putting our heads together, putting our data together, combining that with fintech capabilities or with academic institutions or other specialisms, is actually going to give us much better, more compelling solutions, and particularly to some of the bigger problems that we need to solve for. And the insurance industry is really good at this, right? This is in our DNA. So in financial services, when it comes to co-creation and really working together to get better outcomes, this is a comfortable space for us. So I think it's really an opportunity for us to take the lead in terms of strategic partnerships. These can be in the form of big commitments. So, for example, AIG, I have to get this in, right? AIG has a partnership with Clemson University in the US, and this is solving for some of the real bigger problems around emerging risks. Or it can be, more micro or specific innovations. So, to give you a couple of examples, AIG is working with a banking client at the moment to build the capability to issue multinational programs using blockchain technology. So these are really exciting innovations where we're partnering with industry, with brokers, with clients, with other institutions to bring more interesting solutions. Europcar in Ireland, AIG partnered with Europcar using telematics technology in their rental cars to try and drive or incentivise safer driving behaviour. And last year we launched a JV Azure, which is putting together our private client group, our high net worth team of people with real expertise, with a company, Azure, which has fantastic technology platforms. So just a few examples of where AIG is working in this space, but the point I'm trying to make is these can be individual partnerships where we work together, or they can be much more bigger, strategic, multi-party type partnerships where we're solving for some of the really big stuff, climate change, etc. So I think the third area I wanted to talk about again is probably coming back more to the individual, and that's really around privacy versus personalisation. So I think people you're also familiar now, you're used to the personalisation of marketing that's directed at you. So when you're on the internet, for example, Amazon has looked at your buying behaviour. They make suggestions about what you might want to read next. Unfortunately, the right-hand side of my iPad is full of shoes, and I hate to be a cliche because I shouldn't be up here talking, women and shoes and sort of reinforcing that stereotype when I'm at a diversity event. But unfortunately, it's absolutely true for me. But I think the reality is, and I think Verizon did a report in the last couple of years, which talked about that sort of truce between personalisation and privacy, and the fact that customers are going to get more comfortable with that personalisation of either marketing or, in our case, it might be underwriting, provided that we can demonstrate that there is a tangible reciprocal benefit for them out of this, whether that is through a personalised product, a more suitable offering, or a more cost-effective offering for them. So I think it's really incumbent on companies like ours. We have a lot of data to use. We're going to know our customers better than we ever have, but we also have to make sure that we live up to the end of our end of the deal, if you like. So as I say, I think I guess the final thing. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. So in addition to privacy and personalisation, the final area I wanted to talk about, which is sort of linked, is commoditisation versus customisation. So how much do we see, the commoditisation towards volume and standardisation of what we do versus really customised, bespoke type solutions. And we know that the increased use of data and the technology that's available is going to allow customers to make really intelligent decisions about who they choose to partner with. And similarly, machine learning for us is going to allow us to make much faster decisions. Conversely, we're also going to know more about our customers than we ever have before, but we know that relationships are still essential. So the most successful companies are going to be the ones that apply all of that data and all of those insights that we have about our customers and about the risks that they're facing to full effect in what we offer and in our products and our services. And in the case of brokers, definitely in the advice that you provide. And why is that good for customers? Well, it's going to force industry participants, insurers, brokers, fintech companies, etc., to really focus on where they bring real value. Because where you're not bringing real value and there's inefficiencies there that the customer is paying for, we should expect, and it's already happening, huge disruption in that space that is going to actually drive out those inefficiencies. So I think it is absolutely forcing us towards focusing on where we're actually bringing value to customers and making sure that we're investing in those areas. There's lots more trends that I could talk about, driverless cars, the sharing economy, alternative capital, etc., etc. But those four are really ones that I wanted to touch on because I think it gives you a flavour of the shifts that we're seeing in financial services, and that this is what's providing the basis for us thinking about what we need to do next and what we need to offer next. But more importantly, how we do that. So how we go about it being as important. And, I thought about talking about, what does that have to do with diversity and what does that mean in terms of the skills that we need in our businesses? And the reality is that in all of this disruption, I can try and predict, that we need more data analysts or that we're going to need more people who are good at sort of data infrastructure or cloud, specialisms. But the reality is we don't really know, exactly how this is going to play out. But what we do know is that we're absolutely going to need skills that are different to what we have today. We're probably going to need the ones that we have already, even more specialised and more empowered. And then we're going to have to supplement those skill sets with others, which means we really need to be attracting highly diverse ranges of capabilities to this industry in order for the industry as a whole to really stay relevant. And I think the companies that are going to be the most successful in that future picture are going to be the ones who are able to attract those diverse ranges of talent, both who represent their customers and what their customers actually want, and are also able to bring the specialisms that we're going to need to transform the industry. So I think with that note, I'm going to stop. But I hope I was able to kind of make that link in terms of what we see, some of the trends in the industry and diversity, because I absolutely believe it is at the centre. It is not not something that we have to do. I think it is something that is going to drive whether the current players in this industry are a significant part of the future of that industry and how much disruption there will be, and it's really up to us. That's my honest view. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panel moderator today. We are absolutely privileged to have Simon Fanshawe OBE with us today. Simon, I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with Simon. You may have seen him speak before, or you might be familiar with some of his previous work, either in journalism or in television, or as a co-founder of Stonewall, which is an organisation that I'm sure is recognisable to all of you, or in his current activities as a co-founder of Diversity by Design. So Simon is trying to help all of us figure out how to achieve our diversity goals effectively, and absolutely delighted to have Simon with us. So I'll hand over that, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Well, look, it's a delight, and thank you. It's a little bit worrying when you get wonderful introductions like that, because it makes me think I can't wait to meet me, you know. Look, I won't speak very long. I'm just going to give you 2 or 3 things I hope to think about, give you a framework to think about diversity, and I hope people will feel that when we get to questions and answers, they can contribute honestly, openly, say what you think, say what your anxieties are, give us the benefit of that. This, I hope, is there are no feedback forms or anything ghastly like that. I'm looking at you, no other feedback. Oh, God, I hate. You know, I did a conference, if you're asked the feedback on me, I'd just like to say that if it's out of 10, 9 would be terrific. No one gets 10, so 9's as good as it gets. There was a pile of them at a conference that I did recently, and I looked just to see what they'd said about me, and somebody had written next door to my name, and they said, if I only had an hour left to live in my life, I'd want to spend it listening to a speech by Simon Fanshawe. And at the end there was an asterisk, and I turned to the continuation page, and they'd written, because it would seem like eternity. So I very much hope that you don't feel like that. I don't mind people looking at their watches while I'm speaking, but it always annoys me when they start to tap them to see if they're still working. Now, I want to give you 3 things to think about. The first thing is that this is about change. If any other line of business, if you had pursued any other line of business and invested the amount of money that companies invest in diversity with the poorest return that we have had over the last 30 years, you would have stopped that line of business, or you would have changed what you're doing. So the first thing to say, I mean, in the States annually they're investing £300 million in diversity. If you look at this country, we still realise that actually whilst there is change, there are still more people called John, David and Andrew in the top 297 jobs of the FTSE 100 than there are women and black people. So you can see what to say to you about this is about change. It's not about initiatives. It's not about wonderful things. We have Black History Month, we have lesbian and gay history, and so on, a whole bunch of stuff like that. They are wonderful ways of starting the conversation. They do not change things by and large. They give us individual insights, but they don't change. So the first thing I really want you to think about is, what do we do to change the processes, the systems, and the approaches that we have to the way in which we do business? Because that is the thing that's going to eventually change the numbers. The second thing is that we spend vast amounts of money in this industry, the diversity industry. I call it that because it's kind of become that. We spend a lot of time on educating people and training people and trying to raise their consciousness about how important these issues are. And people go away and they go, this is incredibly important, and it's absolutely vital that we bring diversity to the very heart of our industry. We have just appointed 2 new board directors, and yes, they are white men. We did try very hard, but it somehow didn't quite come off. The reason is not an absence of good intention. Good intentions are fantastic. The trouble is that it's not enough. What creates change in thinking is not trying to change the way people think by talking to them. What changes the way people think is changing the way we behave. I'll give you a very good example of this, and I'm not giving you this example just because I've got one, but I was on a station once about just after civil partnerships had come in. to law. And I was listening to these three women in the station cafe who ran the station cafe. They were talking about a wedding they'd been to that weekend. And they were chatting on about all the stuff you chat on about weddings, you know, the ghastly clothes, the horrible food, and the fun, you know, the love, the affection, how beautiful. They were talking about all those things you talk about at weddings. And it took me about 3 or 4 minutes to realise that we're talking about one of their son's civil partnerships. What changed the view of those women was not going on and telling them how they must love the gays, because we love that when people say that, but actually that doesn't make much difference. What changed it was giving them an institution in which they could participate, which they felt was part of their family, part of their lives, and part of the love they had for their children. If you change the institutions and change the norms, that's the way you start to change behaviour. So it further underlines the need to change behaviour. The best example, the most famous example of this, and you'll have seen a modern equivalent of this on The Voice. Does anybody watch The Voice? Yeah, we'll stop, all right? It's a terrible programme, and you should just use your time better, basically. I don't know what you do if you've got a job here with your interesting life, just get out more. But apart from that, you didn't think that was going to happen, did you? You thought I was going to say, how wonderful, what a woman of taste, but you know. So, the thing, you can see in The Voice, the curtain and the orchestra. So what happened in the orchestras in the 1970s, they were trying to recruit the best musicians. They said, we just want to audition people, listen to how they play, we'll recruit the best musicians, and they kept on recruiting musicians who were white and male. Now, those of you who have a basic grasp of statistics will realise that it's slightly unlikely that all the best musicians would be white and male. I've got nothing against white men. I think some of them are absolutely charming, but that's not the point. The point is that statistically it's unlikely. They weren't clearly listening to the way people were playing. So what they did was put a curtain in between them and the people playing. So they really could listen to how people were playing, and they really could pick the best person. And that's what they did, and of course it turned out not all to be white and male. The point about this is that if you're going to create change, you have to design out the bias. We've all got them. We see somebody, we make judgments about them. Interestingly, in that situation, the people making the judgment, the visual clue of those musicians being white and male actually resulted in those auditioners hearing them play better. So we get driven towards decisions we don't even want to make unless we design a situation where our biased minds can make better decisions. So the 3 elements, so it has to be about change. We want to change the way people behave, to change the way they think, and we need to design situations differently in order to achieve that. Second thought is that it's wonderful that you gave us that introduction there, that actually what you focused on was the relationship between strategy and the challenges that the industry is facing, and therefore the questions of diversity. If you start from strategy, you have a chance of engaging everybody in the industry in the value of diversity. You can't ram it down people's throats. You can't force people to think about this. We've got to find a way of engaging them. And the most compelling way we found of engaging them, we did some work with one of your charming rivals recently. And it was quite obvious when I got to this conference in Barcelona. It's a very odd booking, actually. I got booked to make an after-dinner speech, and I ended up doing a 2-hour session with them after breakfast the following day. I don't know how that happened, but it did. Anyway, it was quite obvious when I met them in the bar the night before, when they had a couple of glasses of nice Spanish wine or so, that actually none of them wanted to do a session on diversity the following day. They were bored by the idea. They thought I was going to stand up and give them a lecture about how they were horrible. So I just didn't. What I did was I asked them about the challenges in the industry. You've talked about all that. You've talked about the challenges of data, of digitization, of personalization, all that stuff. That is coming down. If you start from there, and then ask yourselves the question, what combinations of talent, approaches, backgrounds, and experiences do we need to put together to tackle those challenges? Then you start talking about diversity, which you talk about as a talent question. So it's fundamental that when we talk about this, that whilst there are wrongs to be righted, we actually need to talk about diversity in such a way that we engage people in this as an answer to strategic questions. And the second thing is engage people. Don't, try not to lecture people is the big thing. And, one needs to engage people in an argument that means something to them. I remember when we started Stonewall, one of the big things about Stonewall was, I personally nowadays think it's too gay. I know it sounds odd, but they're always going on about homophobic bullying, to campaign against homophobic bullying. Well, I'm all up for that. I don't want to campaign against homophobic bullying. I want to campaign against bullying. I want to be on the school steps, at the school gates, with mothers and fathers and all sorts of kids who've got bullying, and I want to make common cause with them. Because then it doesn't become about us, it becomes about that. It becomes about our value. And I always used to say about Stonewall, the point about Stonewall was that there was a wrong to be righted, but Actually, it was about creating a platform from which lesbians and gays could make a contribution to a world in which we could all live. And that's the same about companies. Diversity is about creating a platform from which everybody can make a contribution, because everybody's difference is recognised and brought together in combinations that then tackle those big strategic problems. And the last thing is just to say that when people talk about diversity, I think they elide two things which need to be thought of separately. The first is the deficit. There are diversity deficits. I've just alluded to the one at the top of the FTSE. We worked with a law firm that had more partners called David than it did women. 14% of their partners were called David, and only 11% of their partners were women. Called women. You're a woman, go and be a lawyer in the female section. No, 14% of them were called David, 11% of them were women. And the question is, why was that the case? So when you think about these big deficits, don't jump to conclusions. Data will be your friend here, soft and hard. Look at the data, the hard figures. Where are women in the organisation? Where are BME people in the organisation? Look at those things. Where are people with disabilities in the organisation? Are people with disabilities declaring in the organisation? So data will really help you to understand where they are. You'll see that when the gender pay gap stuff comes out. But when you understand it, really interrogate the reasons behind the deficits. In that particular case, it was quite interesting. When we really went into that company and started to find out about it, we discovered two things. Firstly, we asked people pre-partner what was their level of ambition. It was that 50% men, 50% women wanted to be partners. We discovered that women were less ambitious as a group. Well, there's only two possible answers to that. One is women are less ambitious. I doubt it. You lot don't get up in the morning and think, oh, I know, this morning I'll just aim for the middle. You don't, do you? You think, oh, well, whatever. You don't. Women aren't less ambitious, so the question is, what had happened to the ambitious women? The answer was that the ambitious women were looking up the company and thinking, I'm not called David, I'm for the off scheme. So they were leaving. So this company was training people, women, clever women, and losing them. They were losing talent and were spending a lot of money on losing talent. My point being is that you can see the deficit. Actually, the big issue in their deficit was a retention problem. So they really started to try and retain talented women. Now, that can be true. There can be lots of reasons. There can be lots of different reasons why the deficits are there. BME people can be not rising in a company because there is active racism in the company. That should never be discounted, but there might be all sorts of other reasons too. There might be perceptions of leadership, which is a form of active racism, but it displays itself and evidences itself in different kinds of ways. Understand the deficits. And the last thing to say to you is that how do you achieve the dividend from diversity? And one of the problems with this is that people do it in a kind of a sort of arithmetic way. They think, well, if we get a couple of women and somebody is Asian and, get a lesbian, that'll be good. And we'll plot them on the exec committee and that'll all be fine. And it's sort of, go to the lesbian, gay and BME shop, we'll just combine them and that'll be all good. And actually, that's not going to solve the problem. It's not an arithmetic problem, this. Getting women high up in a company, it tends to mean you've bothered to unblock their progress. It tends to mean you've bothered to think about what would fuel and fan and sustain their ambition. Whether or not lesbians and gays rise to the top of the company will be something to do with the fact that you value the difference they bring. I mean, I always think to myself, what is interesting about being gay? Frankly, nothing. It's a very boring fact about anybody. Oh, he's gay. Well, slap me a Helen. You know what I mean? It's not that interesting. Growing up gay is interesting. That's a story. That's where you discover what you can bring to life. Growing up black is interesting. Growing up as a straight white male is interesting. Those are all interesting stories. The question is, what do you bring from your personal experience? So when you start to recognise people's difference, that's when you start to get the dividend. So stop employing or putting into your teams the best person for the job. Because best will pretty much always mean prior attainment, standard ways of assessing best within an industry. What you want is the best teams. And the way you put them together is by recognising difference and forging an understanding. So seeing difference, valuing difference, and learning how to manage and deploy difference. That's where you get the dividend. So just some thoughts as a framework there. Fundamentally, it's about change. Secondly, it's got to mean something to everybody, so it's got to be about driving strategy. And lastly, think about the dividends and the deficits in a different way. So, that's enough introduction from me. Now, I'm going to introduce somebody I really like. It's such a pleasure to actually have to be able to say that and then mean it. No, I'm fabulous at being insincere, but the point is, you know, I'm actually really good at it. Antonia has a great story to tell, and I'm going to say really no more than that. The stage is property genius, fabulous woman, and she's going to tell you a great story. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Antonia Belcher.
So where does it start? It starts with me at a very young age, knowing that, not knowing that I was a girl, as my true gender, but not believing I was a boy, and having to wrestle with that. My response to that, I was the eldest of two younger brothers and then an extremely younger sister. In a family environment which mother Catholic, father agnostic, atheist, we felt to be, but a very hard-working man in the construction industry, running his own building business. I wrestled with my thoughts, but kept them entirely to myself, knowing that if I ever divulged into my family, it would just cause problems within the family, because we to deal with it. It's the power of sexual stereotyping, that nurturing atmosphere back in those days. I was born in 57. So I decided I was going to hide my feelings and lock it away. It was the only way to deal with it. So I did, and I was very successful. I had the odd moments when I read about me flashing in the newspaper at the age of about 11, 12, and it frightened them and was trying to change themselves to be their true self. But it just frightened me. So again, I just locked it all away. And I decided to be the boy that parents, brothers, sisters, grandparents thought I was. That led me to realising that I had to work hard to lock it away. I had to keep myself really engaged on other things. I had to be thinking about something all the time. That made me decide that once I got my A-levels that partly I couldn't go to university, parents couldn't afford it, but I decided to go into work hard. I did a day release, was an apprentice at this surveying firm I joined in the West End, and I worked hard. I became a very young and salaried partner. I was destined to become an equity partner fairly shortly, and it was all about the work. I met a lovely woman, travelling to London, and we married after a year, and then we had our first child, and then our second child, and our third child, and all the while I just worked hard. I qualified as a surveyor, became a chartered surveyor, and then did another degree so I could become a project manager, and then an engineer, and then I decided I needed to go into something legalistic, arbitration, so I became a chartered arbitrator. I just worked and worked and worked. It was my way to deal with my condition. If I stopped and I relaxed, I'd start thinking about something. So what changed? Well, I got to a point in my life where I had, well, we talk about getting there, I sort of got there. I had money. We had a lovely home, kids were growing up, they were doing well at school. I had all the sort of things that I wanted, materialistically. I'd even bought a rundown house in France and set about restoring that in the summers. holidays so that I kept myself really gainfully employed all the time. And I've just been doing all this, and I just started to think about me. I just started to think about my true me, about that person I knew that was part of me that I buried away. I've locked in a box, as I call it. And I got to the point where I decided I wanted to see who me could be. And so I bought some clothes, and in my own privacy, I borrowed some of my wife's makeup, put that on. They'd gone away, it was on my own home. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and I saw my younger sister. And I thought, wow. I had some realization as to who I was, having locked myself away. Before then, I'd only ever imagined it. As a child, I would sort of pretend that I'm in a sealed room where I could be that girl that I thought I might be. Here I was visualizing it. And it frightened me again, and at this time in my life, I'm in my 30s, and it's still really pre-internet, and I've never really read much about the subject or investigated. I thought I was one of a few. It was a rarity to feel like this. And so time would pass, and a year would go, and I wouldn't do anything about it because of the degree to which it frightened me. But as I moved on, I would get a bit more adventurous. I'd buy a few more clothes, and I'd be going for work out of London, staying in a hotel overnight, and I would dress, and I would go out. And it just got to the point where I was doing it, I wouldn't say that regularly, but every now and then I needed to do it. And I got to the point where I actually said to my wife, we're doing really well, we need to invest some money, so my idea is we'll buy a flat in London, I won't need to travel back to Guildford, I can live at that, we can let the flat as a buy-to-let, there's this thing called buy-to-let coming along, which is a good news, we should get on there a ladder early. So I found a flat on the east side of London, furthest away from Guildford, and I bought it, and then I concocted some story with my wife that we weren't being able to attract any tenants, something wrong with the flat, whatever, and I just said to her, what a great idea, we really do if I live there during the week, and come home at the weekend, I can be more refreshed at the weekend, and I can network in the evenings for business. It was all a lie, it was a fabrication, because my plan was to make the flat Antonia's home. I was going to give Antonia a life, but I was going to create a second life, and I did create a second life for 5 years. I would leave work on a Monday night, so at 7:30, 8 o'clock, I'd go back to the flat, I would become Antonia, I would go out, and I would go to various places I'd read about or researched, and I would meet other people like me. And it gave Antonia a life, it gave her substance. It was a nocturnal life, and it was a nocturnal life that really knocked the stuffing out of me. Because I did it for 5 years, and I was doing it from Monday evening through to Thursday evening. I was getting back to the flat about 4 in the morning. I was getting the makeup off as rigorously as I could, and I was getting up and still trying to get into the office for 8 in the morning. I was doing it 4 days a week. It was really taking its toll after 5 years. But I created a whole second life. I created a whole raft of people that only knew Antonia. My bank accounts, store cards, I bought my wardrobe, I learned to become Antonia, and I perfected all the things I wanted to. I went to a voice coach. Halfway through that period, I craved to be not the facsimile of Antonia. I wanted to be more Antonia, and I just started taking hormones. But I was lying to everyone. I was lying to all my family. I was lying to my work colleagues. People would have noticed some differences, maybe being tired or whatever, but I tried really hard, and basically no one knew. It was a total surprise. What happened through the 5 years, as I did it more, I began to feel like I was cheating and lying, and I found it very hard to deal with that. And I found myself on holiday at the end of the 5-year period with my wife. We went to the Seychelles, we were having a lovely holiday, and at the end of it we were having dinner. I just told her, I'm not the person you know, I'm a different person. I need to tell you something that's going to change our lives. And so I told her what I've been doing, and I told her that I don't believe I can not continue to be Antonia. Obviously it shattered her world. By then our children, my eldest was 18, now they're 34, 30 and 26. But at the time they were young kids, and Andrea found it very hard to deal with. Her world fell apart. For 2 years, she retreated into herself, and she had to deal with the death of Anthony. However, we talked about it, which was great. I said to her that, best thing to do is to divorce me and take me for as much as you can, find a new man, and relive your life. Apologise to the rest. I can carry a lot of guilt in these situations. But she didn't. She liked the wine. She drank a bit too much in the first year. I think it was her way of sort of dealing with the issue. Me, I wasn't going to rock the boat with the family, and she asked me not to tell her kids, but to leave it with her, and I said, well, I can't just sterilise my life like that for a long time, so I said, I'm going to come out of work. I'm going to come out of work first, and I will still come home for a year or two as Anthony, and until you can either deal with the issue or we do formally separate, and then also the kids can be dealt with in the context of what we're doing. So I had the challenge of coming out to work, and if you believe me by realising I worked in a very Dickensian West End of London chartered surveying practice where there were no LGBT influences of any description whatsoever. I'd sat around the board table with the other partners, and I'd listened to all the jokes about the secretaries day in, day out. So I decided, how can I deal with this? The only way I really could deal with it was to say, I've got to project manage my transition. I've got to make it a task, and I've got to measure it, and I've got to get the KPIs behind it, and I've got to sort it out. So I knew, because I was one of the equity partners at that time, that we'd exercised the break clause. We were moving in 9 months' time. We were moving to new offices, Duke Street, St James's. And so I basically phoned each of the partners up. I decided who were the most credible, who were the most approachable. I thought I'd start with the approachable first. And I phoned them up and I said, I've got a big problem on the job. It's all going to go pear-shaped. We're in trouble. I need to have a quiet word with you over a glass of wine. Get your wise counsel as to how to proceed. Can you meet me in the wine bar tonight? They would turn up. I would go back to the flat. I got dressed as Antonia. I was in the flat waiting for them. They turned up. They didn't see me. They went to leave. I went and tapped my shoulder and I said, I am here. I said, I've got something I need to tell you. It's very important. So I sat down and I talked. And I said, in 9 months' time, I'm turning up to work like this. You've got 9 months to think about it, although I hope you're going to think about it pretty quickly, and to tell me how you're going to deal with it. And I said, one thing, don't tell the other partners, and they'll do exactly the same. If you felt this is useful and it helps the process, then you won't tell them. And they didn't tell one another. They were very good. And I went through the whole partnership. The last one I said, right, can you please come back to me and tell me whether you're going to be okay with me working like this and accepting me as I am. If not, I will go. I relish working as Antonia. If I have to do it on my own, I'm going to do it on my own. And so they said, yep. They took 2 months to decide. They sent my lieutenant partner, who worked with me on my side, who is the world's greatest ally. They sent him in to tell me their decision, and he just said, they decided you made too much money to tell you to go. And that was it. So no worry, no thoughts about me, what I was going to do, and no questions. That was it. So the 9 months passed. I turned up as Antonia. They hadn't told the staff. I didn't think it was my position to do so, but they hadn't. So the first couple of days, the staff went to the pub and had a laugh and a giggle and obviously talked about it. At the end of that week, I sent an email around just saying, oh no, I said, my door's open. I'd love to tell you what it means for me, and hopefully you'll want to share. And any issues, I'm happy to talk about it. Anyway, not much, didn't really have much communication. I just got on with the job, and I worked with them for 5 years as Antonia. In that period, Andrea had told my oldest son when she'd had a few too many drinks. I think they had an argument. He ran off to see my mum. My mum I'd only told a few weeks before that. I think the pair of them helped one another decide that it wasn't a bad thing. There was life to continue, and in their own little way, they helped my wife. After 2 years, I started coming back home as Antonia from the flat. I dropped Anthony totally, and my wife just said to me, surprisingly, 2 years after I told her, she said, Tony with a Y has died. I mourn his death. I've got over it now. I see a brighter future. There's this other person, Tony with an I, that's coming to it. We're still together. It meant at that point, I transitioned from 2000 to 2003. It meant from that point in 2003 that obviously I couldn't change the final bits of my documentation because the old English law would have divorced us automatically. Two women couldn't be married. So I decided not to change my documentation. I kept my passport and I travelled as Anthony, but as Antonia, as you see. And I went all around the world. Went to China, went to Russia. I thought, let's try it, let's see it, let's see what happens. And it was all fine, thankfully. 5 years on from transitioning at work, I absolutely adored being who I was. Who I knew I was, being the authentic me. I had clients who were coming to me and they were saying, we don't come to you how you look, we come to you for your brain, it makes no difference to us. And it's the power of commerciality and it's the power of being authentic at work. I had clients who come to me and they said, Jesus, Antonia, if you can do this in the construction industry, we want more of you. We want more of you on our jobs. So I was relishing it and I was trying to be the true me. So I was changing, I knew I was. And I was responding to different circumstances in different ways. And I just saw the firm in a different light. I saw my partners in a different light. And after that 5-year period, I said to my lieutenant partner, Andrew, who I'd worked with, who not blinked an eye about what I did. And I just said to him, I'm going to leave. I'm going to set that partnership up that I probably had at the back of my mind that I might have to do if the partners didn't want me here. I'm going to go and set it up. I'm going to be leaving in a 6 months' time. And he said, I thought that might happen. He said, and I've been prepared. He said, I'm coming with you. I'm not staying. I'm going to come and work with you. I said, I was going to go off on my own. He said, no, I'm coming. We told the junior partner that worked on my side of the business, and he said, I'm coming too. And then when we told all the staff that worked for me, which was about 18, they said, we're coming too. So when I left, I took half of the firm with me, which meant the firm had to change. It couldn't survive. And it also meant that they made sure I didn't stay in the West End. I had to move to the city and to my offices, Price Falls. But it was a terribly motivational thing because obviously I was immensely motivated by what had happened and being able to create my own business, immensely motivated by all of them wanting to come with me. But that first day at St Paul's when we started work, I looked around and I just saw re-motivated people. They were really motivated as well. So it taught me a lot. And yes, my wife and I, we went to Antigua a year and a half ago, obviously post the Same-Sex Marriage Act, and the last part, which covers being transgendered, spousal beetle, Andrea wasn't going to exercise that, so we changed everything now, all the documentation, we changed our marriage, and we enacted a same-sex, we've got a same-sex marriage. And it's fantastic. And the last brilliant thing is my daughter, who's 26, and she got engaged earlier this year. And I, in my own view, thought she would ask my oldest son, Nicholas, who's 34, to give her away. And we were just talking about it the other day. We've been arranging the venue and buying the wedding dress and things like that. And she just said, no. She said, you told us as soon as you told us about you said, still call you Dad when we're at home. And you said, that's because you are my dad. I said, yeah. She said, you are my dad, so I want you to give me away. So I'm giving her away at a wedding, and it was fantastic. It was absolutely brilliant. So it's a condensed story, but it's my journey.
I told you it was a good story. Just one thing, actually. You've given some fantastic examples, I mean, particularly your partner and your wife and so on and so forth. I asked you this before, and it's quite interesting, is when you have to negotiate hostility, how did it come to you? I don't mean sort of in the street kind of thing, I mean in relationships with people at work. And how did they give it to you, and what did you do in response that you thought was useful, productive, and you learned about?
Okay, so I basically said to myself, yes, I'm transitioning, but actually I'm going to be asking a lot of people who love me and care for me to transition too. We don't transition in a vacuum. We transition in a family. We transition in a workplace. We transition with all the people we know. And if we don't carry that transition through in a measured, well-mannered way, we risk losing people we love. We risk losing people we work with. So we do need to think about it. We do need to give space and time. And I did give space and time. Through my history, I've known a lot of trans people whose transitions haven't been that successful, or they've lost friends and family along the route. And it's generally because they've sort of pushed it along too fast, in my view. They've made it confrontational by the speed. It's hard when you sort of get it in your head that you're going to, it's like that snake who sheds his skin. Once you decide you're going to shed how you appear, because for me, I've not changed anything in my life, my original life, my male life. I've not changed anything. All I've done is change the way I look. I've still got all my work colleagues, I've still got all my family, I've still got all my friends, and I've managed to sort of just make that jump. But it's not so for many trans people. And I just sort of analysed as I was going along, watching what they were doing. I'm a great watcher. That's why the first time I put makeup on, I could do it quite well, because I'd watched my mum, I'd watched my sister, I'd watched my wife. It's the sort of stuff you file away. And therefore I still watch people transitioning. And it's advice I give now. I'm mentoring lots of people who are trying to transition, starting their journey or partway through. And it's not to be in too much of a rush to try and think about the others, how they're going to feel, how they're going to respond to you. So you've got some degree of sort of basis to mindfulness.
I have to say it's counterintuitive, but passion is one's worst enemy sometimes in trying to change. In other words, if all you do is give people why you think what you think, then actually if you don't listen to them and don't try and understand why they think what they think, actually the chances of changing them are much reduced. Although I do think it's probably really difficult. I mean, I read a lovely piece the other day called written by a black American blogger saying why I don't talk to white people about racism anymore. And she was basically saying she's exhausted because white people are not good at listening. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to think about. And really reinforced.
And we underestimate the power of love. So if people love you, they are going to give you a lot of space. They're going to give you a lot of leeway. But what you've got to have at the back of your mind is, where is that fine line? Where is the threshold where it starts to destabilise the relationship?
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for that story. It's just, I've heard it a number of times now, and I always find it so inspirational, so thanks a lot. In a way, we're going to move a little bit from the very personal to the organisation, in the sense that we're very lucky to have Anthony OBE, or Tony, I should say. He's down officially, he's Anthony, but he's Tone to the rest of us. And but he's chairman of AIG, and what is so significant, Tony, is that you've come. That's incredibly important. It's a really powerful first step in any organisation. So to have the chairman here is absolutely tickety-boo, as my mum would say. But more importantly, it'd be very interesting to hear your take, really, from the governance point of view, where you stand as trustees and guardians of the company, and where you think diversity matters.
Okay. Well, I have a wife and 2 daughters and 3 granddaughters, so I have a good surrounding of female of the species. And they have very, very strong views in life. And I've absorbed those with great pleasure and understanding. So I come with rather a softer side than perhaps most chairmen of boards might come. Governance obviously is desperately important, because without good governance, we don't have successful businesses. And boards have evolved over a fairly large number of years, but haven't really evolved in a balanced and diversified way. If you go back to 2011, and you looked at the FTSE 100 and the FTSE 350 companies, because you get statistics for those, you would find that roughly 12.5% of the makeup of the boards were women. And today, it's 26.1%. So something is happening out there. And what is important is it's not just happening in numbers terms, it's happening in effectiveness. And you can see the changes in boards when they do have a diverse stratum of membership. We all need challenging, and there's absolutely no doubt that a diverse board creates more challenges and makes you think in a different way. So I think it's absolutely vital that we have far broader than just women. We must have LGBT, we must have DEM membership, and there are a lot of steps underway, all voluntary, and in fact this transition to a larger number of women members of boards has happened on a voluntary basis. But there is a huge encouragement coming from Lord Davis and others who are constantly reporting on behalf of government and other bodies to increase the participation on boards from those different constituent parts. And I think if we're going to be truly diversified, we have to have all of those people represented. And there are targets. The original target in 2011 for women on boards was 25, and we got to 26. The latest target is for people of colour to have at least 1% on all FTSE 350 boards by 2025. Now, that sounds like a pretty small target, but it's a start, and I think it's very important that we should embrace that. If one is looking as a chairman at the composition of one's board, inevitably, the old, when we've heard it before, the old issue of meritocracy. Well, we want somebody who's the best. I think we want a board that's the best. We don't want individuals who are the best. I think it has to be a collective, of collective value. You can't change everything terribly quickly because you have 3 or 4 year contracts on board, sometimes 5, and often people become very valuable to a board. But you have to be aware that as soon as someone is ready to depart, you must look at the other options. Now, interestingly, in the employment world, what we call headhunters are now being very strongly encouraged to make sure that they look for diverse candidates. When you go to them and you say that we need a new independent non-executive director, they are now very much more focused on sourcing women and hopefully other constituents. When we, not that long ago, sought to recruit a replacement for a director, we actually had over 100 women candidates. Unfortunately, we could only take one. But it does show what is out there in terms of capability, experience, dynamism, contribution, and all those good things. So I think, I won't say an awful lot more, but it's top of my agenda. I think it's absolutely invaluable that we have no groupthink, but that we have diverse think. Diversity of thought, diversity of practice, diversity of challenge, all those things are absolutely vital for good corporate governance. And I'm just going to quote something from a fellow chairman, which was that he profoundly felt that companies have to be grounded in society in a way that they sometimes forget. Where companies and society are company, you've got a very perilous state for business and possibly capitalism. You've just got to stand up and say more diverse boards is the right thing to do. So we'll just do it.
Thank you very much indeed, Tony. Thanks a lot. Nerissa Naidu is the Global Head of Strategy for AIG, and again, in a similar question, is really, why do you think more diversity brings more rigour in your area of the business, which is presumably strategising around those big challenges in the environment, the insurance environment?
I'll give you a bit of background of myself. I grew up in South Africa during apartheid in my teenage years, and diversity for me was always about race. You never really thought about gender, you never thought about LGBT or anything other than race, because that's what your country focused on. And my first job as an engineer, I worked in a steel plant. And so if you think of a female engineer on a steel plant, I was the only female engineer, and I was one of 3 non-white people as an engineer. So you know, we were tokens. And I would say diversity is important because obviously it shapes your thinking, and it shapes how companies choose to grow. My first job is an example of where the company was closed-minded. Everything that we wanted to do was based on history. And over the course of time, it didn't survive very well, and so it was acquired by an international player, the Metal Group. But that example sits with me very often because if I think of myself on the receiving end, there's a few things that diverse candidates don't want that I want to talk about. We don't want to be the token. We don't want to be the only person sitting on the panel all the time, the example as to why the company is doing well. We're embracing it. You know, and actually living and breathing and making it part of the culture of the company is really important. And so I left the company obviously 2 years later, and I joined the consulting firm Accenture. And Accenture, I think, was where I felt a little bit at ease and more at home. And I felt like the conversations that I was having about my career were one that I could see myself making partner again. So I saw opportunity. You know, diverse candidates don't just, again, want to think about me on the medium term and where am I in the longer term. I want to see that I have the same future as somebody else. And Accenture, I saw that. And the thing I would tell people who are starting off, regardless of the diverse class you want to be, or even if you're John or David, you know, it's kind of up to you to change some of that culture and find advocates who are going to help you change. You're fighting the good fight now, but there's work to do, as Tony said. So you can't just sit back and say, well, I am diverse, make it happen. I think you need to fight for it. And you need to show that your strengths, or part of your diversity, is your strength. And that you don't have to conform, and you need to be demanding, right? So your advocates should know you want to be the CEO, or you want to be the partner, or you want to be the regional head of whatever. And they should be helping you to shape some of that. And that's what I did when I was in consulting. You know, I found somebody, a few people, who were still my career counselors, even though I left consulting. And they sort of shaped my thinking to say, it's also not about you being diverse, it's also about your thinking being diverse. And that when you pick your own teams, that you would be diverse in your own thinking. Because very often, I find somebody that looks like me. Or, you know, I have, even in AIG, one of my teams has 80% of black people on that team. That doesn't make it a normal occurrence. It means that you've decided to be secular. And we as leaders have to guard ourselves from being that. We also have to, you know, intuitively break our own biases, whether it's the racial one, the gender one, so that we can form high-performing teams. And if I take that back to where I am today, and you know, Romney mentioned the challenges in our industries, how am I going to break the norm if everybody toes the line with my own thinking? Some of my, some of the people that work for me are sitting in the audience, and they'll tell you that I expect them to challenge me, and I expect them to be diverse in their thought, and that's why they're in my team. I've had arguments with some of them where they say, you know, so certain person doesn't think like you. How do you entertain that? Why do you understand that? And why are you not, you know, correcting that person and their language or their style? And I'm like, that is the person's strength. When I need something, I go to that person because I understand that that is going to be the idea that brings us back to make something defining for AIG that's different from the norm. So, you know, if I think about my career and how that's helped shape, I've worked here, I've worked in New York, I've worked in most continents except Australia. So Romney, I'm going to have to find a way to get there. But the different cultural experiences also teach you the value of things and appreciating why you don't know all the answers. People that look like you don't know all the answers. And just because people tend to agree with you doesn't mean that you're always right. And, you know, in my current role, we're redefining AIG's operational strategy for the next 5 years. What I hope is that my team is high performing. So to Tony's point, it's not about saying the candidate that looks or acts like me is the best and I'm going to have 20 of those androids and that's going to get the best answer. It's about everybody continuously challenging the mindset, and that gets to disruption. Companies like Lemonade and Oscar Insurance formulating here. It's because people go against the norm. So I think the guide to the employers is, create more of a culture of community where people don't feel like, yes, I know I'm the diverse candidate, but I feel out of place. And I think for employees, it's about making a home there and understanding that you have to fight a little bit to be in that home, but once you get there, you'll be a part of the family that's recognized.
Thank you very much indeed. That's terrific. I'm going to write that in a sampler or something. Just because people agree with you, it doesn't mean that you're always right.
I've said that through these conversations.
That's terrific. Andrew Tunnicliffe described himself as an outgoing CEO. It doesn't mean by which he's fun at parties and he's actually leaving of Aon Risk Solutions. And so you're going to talk about, I hope, about risk and diversity.
Correct, Simon. Actually, just to refer to your comments before, so here I am, a white middle-aged man called Andrew, and I am a musician. Seriously, I am a musician. I really sort of what a stereotype that is. I feel incredibly proud of Aon as an organisation and the work we do around D&I, and all credit to Catherine and the sort of 7 groups that we've got in this space. But both AIG and Aon are risk advisors to clients on the subject of risk management generally. Similar to boards and to multinational organisations as well. And not getting the D&I issues onto the agenda, to me, presents a risk. And it's interesting, when we talk about risk management, we tend to focus on materiality. What do I mean by materiality? Well, actually, we have a tolerance for certain financial value, and if stuff happens below that financial value, we don't really care about it. That's actually quite a short-sighted, negative way of looking at risk. Second, when we think about impact risk, we run around with our hair on fire because somebody's unplugged a computer and the whole IT system is gone, or something like that. A pretty topical subject, that. But, this sort of impact risk, this massive event that's happened, that we worry about those situations. And then we tend to worry about what we know. We don't think about what we don't know. We don't think about the horizon of the change that's happening out there. And then we tend to think about things we can analyse. We're data freaks. Okay, we like to do Monte Carlo simulations, you'll know this, with engineering calculations or whatever. And we come up with probabilities. This is a 1 in 20-year scenario, but it could happen next year. Okay, so those sort of things occupy our mind on the risk management's agenda. But there is another type of risk, and that's what I would call creeping risk. That risk that sneaks up on you over a period of time, puts its hands around your neck, and actually starts to kill the organisation. And unless we understand that type of risk, then we don't have sustainable and productive organisations generally. So what's on the horizon from the perspective of D&I? So there's definitely a regulatory risk, and we're already starting to see the impact of that happening. And we should be in a position where we can influence that risk rather than ignore it. It's really important that we have those influences, those positive influences, rather than negative influences trying to control a negative downside. When we talked about the value chain, it's not just about you as an organisation, it's about what your customers feel, what your clients feel, what your institutional investors are also expecting of you as an organisation. So it's important to understand those issues as well. And I'm not parking emotion to one side and talking about D&I, but from a risk perspective, getting this into your enterprise risk management framework is really, really important. Talent retention, talent attraction. It's amazing when we look at our client base, how the buying style of our clients, our future clients, is changing. You think about the way the kids trade over the internet now, and the differences that we're starting to see about the way people purchase things. Robbie has alluded to some of these issues before. So, for sophisticated organisations, for chief risk officers and risk managers, we need to think about the D&I agenda from a creeping risk perspective. How best to manage it, how best to influence it, how best to enhance it, and actually deliver key deliverables for the stakeholders.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Annika Symonds is the Chief Administrative Officer and for AI and Hewitt, but she is the exec sponsor for 2 of the staff networks within the company. So perhaps you could talk about what you think they contribute to the business of the company.
Absolutely. As Andrew just mentioned, we have 7 groups. I'm lucky enough to be the exec sponsor on 2 of those. It's actually a very deliberate decision of mine personally to sponsor 2. One is, unsurprisingly, the Women's International Network, which obviously I clearly personally identify with. The other is actually our multicultural group, and for me, one of the things I wanted to do in sponsoring was ensure that I challenge the biases that we've been talking about just now, those personal ones, the things I don't understand and don't identify with in other groups. And I actually think, well, we've touched on it a bit, Simon, I think in your opening remarks you talked about kind of institutionalising things to change behaviours. And I think our business resource groups have done a fantastic job over the past several years in raising awareness, pushing the profile, challenging our businesses and our business leaders. The one thing you see consistently through all the groups is a great degree of passion, tenacity, individuals who really have a bit between their teeth for something that's personally important to them. And that's fantastic in, bringing networking events together and, doing good things like that. We're actually changing our business. What's made a real difference, I think, is overlaying those business resource groups with the diversity council that we have here in the UK. What that has enabled is a bringing together of those different resource groups to really channel a workforce that is hugely willing to drive change in our business, to share. We have some very mature business resource groups, some that have been going for many years, have huge networks. We have some that are in their infancy at the moment and in areas that get a lot less press in these kind of situations. So by bringing the groups together in events like we're doing tonight with the LGBT and the gender networks coming together, I think we're really starting to harness the true potential of business resource groups for our businesses. We are identifying opportunities to cross-pollinate to help ensure we don't develop kind of silos and biases. You talked about silos at the beginning. That helps drive much more long-standing change in what we're trying to do in the business, and ensures that we don't end up kind of repeating errors we've made before, and we can really capitalise on what we're doing.
Thank you very much indeed, Annika. Thank you. And lastly, thank you very much indeed for stepping in, Teresa Farrington. Teresa, I think, is the convener or the co-convener of the insurance-wide LGBT network. So perhaps you could talk about not only what that contributes to the businesses, but also to the sector at large.
Good evening, everyone. So I'd start by saying how and why we launched the LGBT Insurance Network, aka Link. And that was really 2 drivers. One was that other sectors had their own cross-sector LGBT networks. We had Interbank for the investment banking groups and Interlaw. So there was a challenge to say, shouldn't we have one? But that alone wasn't the reason. It had to have, again, good business drivers. And at the time that we were talking, the CII had launched Ensuring a Better Future, which was a survey of young people in 2010 about why they weren't choosing insurance as a career of choice. And suffice it to say, there were quite a lot of damning statements about the perceptions of the insurance industry. And we thought at the time that trying to develop the profile of the industry to be more inclusive and more diverse would encourage new talent, but also start projecting us as a much more progressive sector than clearly these young people were thinking of us. We now have over 700 members, representing 220 organisations across the sector. And why is that good for business? Well, I think initially it's about starting off the conversation. I would say, aside from the women's threads that have been going on, there are multiple women's networks across the insurance industry. We were the first other organisation to kind of form and try and shift, start the dialogue with organisations about where they were in terms of their diversity and inclusion, and try and drive greater visibility for the LGBT community. And through that, then start to try and shift the needle in terms of how organisations thought about their LGBT community and whether they were actively engaging with them. And then also just kind of connect people with our membership, which was their grassroots membership of LGBT employees, to try and help drive a deeper understanding of the issues that matter to them, and basically try and drive through the idea of role models and allies, and there are lots of other key words that are becoming quite common in the conversation in diversity and inclusion, because again, you cannot be what you cannot see, and so if we were to try and improve the growth and development of all of our, not just the LGBT networks, but all of our diversity and diverse threads, then we must try and improve the growth of those individuals so that we do start seeing the pipeline that allows people to be on boards. And so one of the other things that we were also trying to do was about sort of getting young people into the industry. And I think one of our problems that we need to face is, to your point about we're going to need lots and lots of new flavours of talent, and a lot of people are still self-selecting out of not even applying for roles in the insurance industry, and we need to figure out how we're going to tackle that. Otherwise, when we are looking for those new talents and those new skill sets, we're going to struggle against other industries such as the banks or the legal sector that are more prominent and do seem to be a lot more favoured by young talent coming into the industry. So, I do think that our work in this space broadly across all of the networks, I'm pleased to also share with you that, and I hope you're already aware, that a new cross-sector group called ICANN, the Insurance Cultural Awareness Network, that's particularly focusing on the BAME population in insurance, has recently launched. But all of us doing this work is to tackle that risk about getting talent in the door and keeping it, because I think a lot of this is about retention. And once they're in the organisation and they feel empowered because they're supported, their individuality is supported, and they're included, then they will start to use that voice in ways that challenges leadership, promotes great ideas, and avoids groupthink. And those are, again, are things that every regulator is going to be chucking nuts about. So,
thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you very much, Teresa. Certainly when we're asked, Diversity by Design Consultancy, when we're asked to talk about or do you work with network groups, we always say sort of three things to them, and I will express it next with you. One is that the interesting question for them to think about in terms of reference is, what is their role in driving the strategy of the business? So what particular function can they perform in enabling the business to advance? The second thing is, I think, which is quite useful, is how they can help each other, because there is a kind of internal function. There's a kind of mentoring, as you say, you can't be what you can't see. I mean, and I was chairing a conference the other day, which was hilarious, because it was all women except me and 3 men. I was the chair, which was funny. But every single woman who spoke talked about the need to strategize their career. It didn't matter what it was, they said basically said you're fooled. And I think that's true of lots of different kinds of people, and that's useful. The third thing often is useful is to host events that are nothing to do with you or the group that you're involved with. So just have a thing on the disruptive influence of digital, or have a thing on personalisation versus privacy or whatever, and you host it. And we always find that, do those ring bells for the kind of useful contributions that the networks could make with you? Annika, do you think, or
certainly, maybe that touches a little bit on where I was talking about what we've done internally to kind of bring the different groups together, and actually as we sit here today, we're joining forces with AIG to start to partner with other organisations. I think there's a lot more we could do, and I think what you're talking about is kind of going beyond actually what Roman started to do today, which is, let's not just sit here and talk about diversity, let's talk about business problems and business strategy, and try and ensure that we have diversity in the room and diversity of thought in that discussion. And I think that's a really interesting way to explore how we get some real value from events like this, other than giving profile and kind of encouraging networking between different organisations.
We did some work in a bank recently, it was just, and it was with the networks, and what was really interesting was it was a bit stodgy, to be honest. They couldn't sort of quite work out. And then they'd say, well, let's talk about recruitment. You say, well, okay, but actually that's really HR's job, so we've got to find what is your role in helping. And then something happened. a bloke said he'd only been in the firm a few months, and he started talking about how he felt like being a man in the firm. And actually what it started was an incredible conversation about the culture of the company. And then they realised they'd got an insight that they could bring to the company that actually no one else had. And they've really gone down that, and it's that sort of thing, isn't it? It's finding something sort of real business kind of advantage.
And doing it in a safe environment, I think, is the other key part. So that kind of diversity branding linked to something which is about a business issue, kind of encourages people, I think, perhaps to be more open, maybe where they would be in a natural business environment.
Tony, do you find on the board, and you don't need to name people, but how much do you think that, you said it was very much on top of your agenda, but actually when the board does its work, how much do you think it could become a way in which the board approaches the business rather than being a sort of, number 8 on the agenda, that actually it's as important to them as an approach?
I mean, as a board, we have a list of standing items that the board must review at certain intervals. And I believe this is something that should be on that standing item list to make sure the board has it front of mind at least twice a year, and that it's fully debated and we have full time to discuss it and make an action plan from it. Because you can debate everything, and if you have an action plan following it that you don't implement, it's meaningless. So I think that's absolutely vitally needed for every board to have. I doubt that many have it.
I doubt, and actually the way Andrew was talking, I doubt that many have it in the context of a risk. Because that seems to me to be a way in which actually, if you see it as part of the risk question, don't you think, Andrew, that you broaden it, it doesn't become like a thing on its own, it becomes something that you use as a tool. Yes.
Bluntly, it also it grabs the attention. It grabs the attention. You've got to be able to translate these things into a future impact on the business. And that way it will grab the attention.
Yeah.
And you sort of park that emotion and say, okay, if we don't do this, we don't do it in the proper way, then this is going to put us in a disadvantageous situation.
Nerissa, just, you worked in New York and you've worked here, and obviously you've got big aspirations to go. She wants to go to Australia. Did you pick that up? You'd be going back, wouldn't you? That's what I'm saying at all. What do you see as, how do you see the differences between the way the company, from an American point of view, approaches this and from a UK point of view? Because sometimes one has these kind of global strategies, and our experience is that actually the way in which America treats, for instance, the significance of race in America is actually seen in a different way, isn't it, than it is here. So, some comments on that?
Yeah, so I think within AIG we have employee resource groups that focus on this. So I think in terms of equal soundboarding, both New York and London, as the regional and the global heads, have instituted in its culture the recognition to have these resource groups. I would say where the similarity, and this is room for work, is the hiring practices and making it a table for agenda as we think about the future workforce. So I think it's similar. I think the way that, for example, in New York or in the US generally, African American, Hispanic is sort of diversity there. Here there's a different flavor of diversity, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't embrace whatever the definition is. Since they have a focus, I think that's a positive, but the work that we have to do is really cultivate that into or institutionalize it in both sides of the pond, and make sure that every time we hire or every time we're picking a senior candidate, that this is top of mind, not just have resource groups and think about it right away.
Thank you. Questions and comments and contributions and experiences and challenges and recipes, I guess, if numbers got you down. Who would like to start? In the front here. There are some microphones. If you'd be good enough to wait, that would be great. Would you look like David?
I have a question for the panel. I wonder if they have a view on quotas versus targets.
Quotas versus targets. Anyone like to have a crack at that? Yep. Teresa?
I'll throw in an alternative, which is Rooney's rule, which was applied, I think it was in baseball, it was in America.
The Rooney rule, yes.
Yeah, and basically the idea is that you make sure, so they realised that they never had enough. The majority of the players were black, but they never had any black leaders. So they made sure that the rule was applied that you had to have at least one black person on the slate. So that's not a quota, that's not a target, but suddenly those people got practice, they got interviewed, they got practice, they became more, better experience at the process of applying for that kind of role, and within a couple of years there was a significant difference in the makeup of the leadership teams across the NFL. So I think, whatever the correct acronym is there. So I like that as a model, because that's just giving exposure to people, and that's not necessarily applying rules.
There is a question. Tony, you talked in a sense about the creation of momentum too, and you talked about the importance of it being voluntary, which I assume means that you'd be in favour of goals and targets, but not of quotas. Would that be?
I'm very much in favour of targets, because targets often are insidious, quotas invariably are not. If we look at what the Lord Davis report has been telling us, it's been that setting a target, which is a manageable one, has been achieved in terms of women on boards. And obviously that can be extended, as I said earlier, to the other constituents. So targets clearly do work. Up to what point do they know? If we've got to 26%, we probably should be 49 or 50%. 50 clearly. We've got a long way to go. But you've got momentum, as I said earlier.
I think one of the difficult things, if I can contribute, is that with quotas, is that you've got to enhance the pipeline, and you've got to understand what is a reasonable timeline, or a sensible, or a stretch timeline for those quotas. Because otherwise, the danger is that you have, and it's partly happened as a result of Davis, is that actually there are not necessarily, and there is an increased number of women, but there are quite a lot of women who've got more than one role. And in Norway, one of the things that happened was that they expanded the size of the board. So instead of actually keeping the board at kind of governance optimum, which was sort of 12 to 15, actually they became sort of 18. So in fact, it didn't enhance women's voices as much as it perhaps should have. So there's a question of pipeline as well. Whereas the thing about targets also have that. But at least what you do with the core is to understand the likely timeline over which you can achieve something, because the momentum is important. Do you have a view?
Instinctively, I'm against quotas because you don't want to be in the room because you're obliged to be there. But I'm taking on board your original point about real change and changing processes. I wonder if we'll ever get there unless we actually institutionalise some form of change like that.
One of the things too about this is that I beg people not to think there's a trade-off between diversity and quality. Because what people do is often what they mean is like their experience. So actually, boards, teams, you should be prepared to offer opportunity to bring them on, which is another point.
So
yes.
I think you alluded to this, but the whole thing around targets in this space is you do have to have a correct measurement period. And I guess the fundamental part of that is setting objectives, because I can tell you the vast majority of people I come across have annual objectives. They don't have multi-year objectives. And we need to get better at reviewing performance on a multi-year basis.
Well, certainly one of the big clearing banks set themselves the 40% target for women in the top, I can't remember how many Grammys. And they clearly haven't, well, maybe it's a tautology when it comes to banks, they hadn't done the maths. So actually it's it's pretty unachievable, which is not helpful to anybody, because everybody just feels bad. Others. Lady black and white there. Go on here. You've got the other microphone on yes. Perhaps you can bring to this man on the right here, on my right. Please.
Comment on a question. In a former life, I led the women's network at Cisco, which is a tech company, very male dominated, and just coming back to the comments about business-led employee resource groups. So we were really, really focused on bringing that business-led piece to it, and so we recognised that a lot of our events, guess who showed up? Lots of men, not many women. Big problem for Cisco, because they knew that more and more women were coming in, and as they were trying to sell across the enterprise, and so we created events which were business-led events, but specifically targeting female customers, not just in technology, not just in IT, but right the way across the customer base. And literally just to build relationships with them.
Example?
So a specific example, we had a customer in Switzerland where we had no relationship with them. CIO was cold called to come to the women's event, effectively, but business-led event. She came because she knew there would be other women there, and it was business-led. But while she was there, she met the country manager, and that opened the door to that customer. 2 years later, we sold a $2 million deal to that customer. Now, was that just because of the event? No. But were the account team the first people to say it was because we opened the door to it through a different route? Yes, they were. So I think it's a good example of how, if you think laterally, you really can use networks to drive business.
And your question?
No question.
Oh, no question. Just got it. Thank you. That's terrific. Thank you. Sir.
Yeah, thank you. My question is about how to drive the change, right? And how to convince people about the need of the change. In your case, Antonia, you needed to change. You felt it. So that gave you all that energy and drive and determination to pursue that change. How we convince people about the need of that change?
For me, so I had 2010 where I was sort of had my head below the parapet. I'd done everything I told you about, but I wasn't out talking about me to the general public. But I said to my partner, my wife, and my 3 children, I said, can I have your permission to stick my head above the parapet? Because I got absolutely fed up with reading all the horrid, torrid stories in the press where the media want to tell harrowing stories about people who transitioned. You know, it has the press were love to only talk about all the angst and the aggro and everything that's gone on. They weren't telling any nice stories about transitioning. So I said to my family, well, we're a nice story, we're a good story, it's a true story, so maybe I should get out there and talk about it, and I should tell people, because there are happy trans people. We have a unique thing within the trans community that there are a lot of people who are stealth, which means they've transitioned, maybe they've moved down to their area, and maybe they have had a bad journey and they just don't want to be reminded, and therefore you will only know them as Mary, but they might have been Mark. But those people, in my view, you know, they in a way also need to be out so that the general public will understand that actually the trans community is a bigger community than what we believe. There are more of us. There's quite a lot of us buried in a stealth way, but that's again because they're worried about being their true selves, being open, and what the media are going to say. So for me, I just wanted to be more media focused, tell my story, and I now go around businesses and I talk to businesses because I actually understand the power of my authenticity in the sense that I know that if you have people in your organisation who are transgender and they're not out, they're coming to work and not giving you their whole self. They're almost handcuffed, one arm behind their back. You give them the opportunity to be their true self, they're going to give you more. They're going to be very loyal because they're just looking for somewhere where they can be their true selves. So I'm talking to businesses, I'm saying that if you don't create that trans-friendly, trans-aware environment, these people will move. They'll go somewhere where your competitor is creating that environment because they will be welcome. They'll be able to become who they know they are, and they will give their all. And I think it's the same for everyone. If you don't create that environment where people can be their true selves, work, live happily, then you just risk losing them. And we're all in a limited, all chasing that talent. And I actually don't believe the statistics on the LGBT side. I actually think the numbers are greater. I certainly know they are on the trans side. And if you start thinking that they say it's 1%, it might be 1% binary, it's certainly not 1% non-binary, it could be a lot greater. And you're automatically sort of, if you don't put the policies in place with your recruitment consultants and the like, and they're just recruiting in their likeness rather than yours or the way you want to be, you're automatically removing a big chunk of potential talent that is coming into your business. And I also believe, as we've talked around here, businesses, board tables, they need to be representative of the society they want to work in, be in, trade in, sell to, buy from. And it filters down from not just the business, but it filters down into their supply chain. It goes to the print room, it goes to the rubbish disposal area, the loading bay, how the trucks fit. It goes everywhere, and you have to sort of think that way, because that is diversity.
Can I make another question?
No, go.
It's about how do you think is the best approach to convince the people to that actually are a majority, which are the white, the white male, to engage that change and to open their minds.
So there is a sort of a division in this, I think, being created in society. We've got the millennials. The millennials think like that naturally. They don't think the way the older generation think. Their friends are very diverse. They like the power of that diversity. They enjoy it. They respect it. So in time, as time moves on, it's going to be easier. I think the trouble is the older generation, and the issue is how quick does a business want to get into that millennial mindset. It can be slow, take its time, and it might risk damage to the business, it might risk the loss of opportunities that would otherwise be there, or it can get there quicker. Obviously you need to do that in a measured way, but unless you're actually looking at it, exploring it, weighing, you're going to just let it osmotically happen.
Well, Andrew, let's ask that from a risk point of view. I mean, does that argument tell with that kind of majority population within the business? Do those men, those white men, do they buy into it? Do they get it? Do they see the point of it? In your experience?
Increasingly, yes. But we've got some way to go. Let's be honest about it, we've got some way to go. It's interesting, I was talking to Catherine before, through the Outreach network. I mentored a gay guy from Lloyds Bank. And it's interesting that the relationship we started out with was quite formal. It was quite formal with him. But we soon bonded very, very quickly. And the program has now come to an end, but we've remained as friends. And I'm proud to say we meet each other, sort of every other month, have a cup of coffee or some lunch or whatever. And we've been talking about his life and his career, and my life and my career, and where it's all going. And I think you need to, and I'm not saying that I'm a shining light there, we need to get more people doing that type of stuff, relatively simple, and actually selecting individuals who are brave enough to actually say, I'll throw away a bit of that prejudice that I have, and I'll actually take this seriously and try and make it work. And for me, it's been really eye-opening.
Can I talk as well?
Yeah, true.
Also, I think you mean outstanding.
Outstanding, sorry, yeah.
I think taking it back to Simon's, it's about bringing out business risk, business threats. There's loads of threats in the insurance industry, different directions, and then figuring out what needs to change and how are we going to deliver that change. And then diversity seems to be, to your point, exactly the common thread. You engage in the conversation, and how do we ensure that we've got a new, fresh lifeblood, and new and fresh doesn't necessarily always mean, by the way, young people. It could just be drawing people in from different parts, different sectors, and we're just getting fresh perspectives on our problems and how we need to change. And I think if you tie it back to business, and it's not going to stop being just about being nice to people, which is the big conception about what diversity is, and then it was about empowering and enabling you to empower and drive forward your organisation, then that's not a no-brainer.
If try this with your team, one of the things we do with teams of people is say, all right, what's happening to the industry? Where's the company going? What's your team's tasks, strategy, goals over the next year? Now have a look at the team and think about both who they are in terms of identity questions and also how they work in terms of their style. Have that conversation with each other and then start to think, what were the people who bring difference to that team? What would they look like if they walked through the door? In terms of what you want to achieve. The other thing I think it's worth saying is that if we're absolutely honest, if you increase the pipeline of talent from groups that are underrepresented, then the groups that are overrepresented will face greater competition. We'll have really succeeded when we get some truly mediocre women in some really senior jobs. If you're not very good at what you do, or you've not got the right talent in the job you're supposed to be doing, there is competition there. So we kind of have to be honest about that, but actually, if you start from the good of the business, then that helps you, I think, to articulate something. Actually, somebody else had their hand up. Was it you who had their hand up earlier? Maybe it was. One more question. Hang on, how many men have we had? How many women have we had?
saying that, well, I want to be medium ambitious to an extent. And I definitely wake up in the morning thinking, okay, I really need to kick ass in my company. Whereas Nerissa, you mentioned that you know, if you want to succeed in a workplace, I'm rephrasing because I don't remember the exact quote, if you really want to succeed, you have to grab it. Now, I find when I interact with businesses, which I do every day, that's part of my job, that sometimes I'm seen, I feel, maybe it's me feeling that, I'm seen as a competent supporter as opposed to a competent leader, and now I have to be a competent leader in my company with the role I was given, because I'm in a kind of semi-leading a team, and I'm an example to the new members of staff, and I have to move forward. How, not from a leadership perspective, but from the perspective of the people who are pushing up and trying to get into leadership and trying to succeed, what are the key steps that you'd recommend, all of you, to somebody to prove themselves that they're not just a competent supporter?
Great question. Why don't we start with you, Nerissa? We'll just go down the path.
You know, I started off by saying advocates and communication, right? So if you feel that you are the new example, because if you look above you, you're the one leading the way, you need to find advocates. And I think the more senior you get on with it, it's you know, I can tell you work harder than everybody else, but if you're doing work that doesn't get noticed, people may still not promote you. But you have to advocate for yourself and get supporters more senior than you to recognize you. Because ultimately, when it's time for promotion and there's 5 of us on a panel and I want to get picked, I need to advocate for that. So I think that's the first part, right? And I think the second is, when you're moving up an organization, there's no one path, right? So yes, I was in consulting, I'm now in insurance, this is my 3rd role in insurance, I was also in treasury. I like to do different things. No one knows that, you know, the path upward has to go sideways but up. Everyone just thinks linearly, and you need to be very clear about what you want and how people can help you get that. And also recognize that it's not just the one way up, that you could take different directions and still get up there.
Fantastic. Tim?
You have to be very brave and go to someone at the senior level, be mentored, say, I want to be mentored. Because you get noticed and you'll have a one-on-one communication, and that allows your talent to be communicated through another level of the business. So that's a very simple one suggestion. There are many others.
Thank you. Antonia?
I can only quote this by respond in the way of an example that I find at the office. So I've set up the new firm in a fairly diverse way. I do a lot of strategic work. I need to bring teams together. We brainstorm things at the beginning. I will intentionally bring in several girls, several boys. We'll sit around the table and we'll brainstorm the issue to begin with. And I can guarantee that when it's over, I'll go back to my office and the phone will ring and it'll be one of the girls. And she'll say, wasn't he talking a load of rubbish? And I go, well, why didn't you say so? I knew it was. Why didn't you actually say he was talking rubbish? She said, well, he might have been a little bit right, or I wasn't necessarily sure. I said, well, just think about it. You now wasted that brainstorming session because you needed to confront him. You needed to tell him what you thought, or you needed to tell me what you thought. This is the whole point. And so I actually spent my time saying to the girls, you know, the boys don't play fair. If you read their CVs, they're always over-8. If I read yours, it's very accurate. It's almost on the verge of being not, you know, you could sell it more. And so I said, you know, when you're in a male environment, you need to compete like boys compete. You need to think the way they think. You need to be on a level playing field with them. And it helps a bit, I think.
Andrew?
For me, it's two things. Firstly, it's about fellowship and the ability to raise the bar and lower the bar. Because if you keep it at one standard height and you ignore people that can't make that bar, you won't get the fellowship. Okay? And you shouldn't anyway. It's the same thing as be prepared to change your mind or admit you're wrong. Okay? Because sometimes, you know, you can just stick with your opinion because you want to be seen in a certain way. And it's really quite healthy to sometimes say, I got it wrong.
Teresa?
I'd say I hear a degree of imposter syndrome, and you should grab that opportunity. You're not just can do it. You've probably got to where you are because you can do it, so keep doing it and bring the team with you.
I
Okay.
actually think it's all of those things and probably some other things. I think sponsorship and mentoring are important, and actually having more than one sponsor gives you the access to those different opportunities to take a different path. I think you have to be careful when taking a different path, you're clear on what you want, because I think women typically, and possibly other groups suffer from this as well, have a tendency to take a path probably has less resistance. It's generally the work that other people don't want to do, and it's horrible and generally very difficult, but tends to be more in a support capacity rather than taking the limelight. So I think finding opportunities in other areas, I've done it actually through diversity and inclusion in our organisation as well, to get the profile that someone was mentioning here. But sticking your head above the parapet, being brave enough to believe in yourself, being brave enough to stick your hand up for something you think, oh my God, I can't do that in a million years, but someone said maybe you could, and actually being like one of the boys is a big part of it too. So everything everyone said, which is a real challenge.
I think it's worth also saying that I slightly misstated what I was saying, in the sense that ambition means doing what you want to do and being able to follow that path and it not being blocked. It may be that what you want to be is the best receptionist in the company. It may be that what you want to do is be the CEO. It may be that you want to do whatever it is that you do to the fullest of your ability. And that's the ambition that I think is important. That you don't, diversity is not about everybody being the CEO. Diversity is about everybody understanding the depth and breadth of their talent. I was talking to Andrew Wostenholme the other day, who runs Crossrail, and I just said casually, how's it doing? He said, oh, it's coming in on budget and on time. I was like, what? He said, it's coming in on budget and on time. I said, that's extraordinary. He said, well, it's quite unusual for a project like that. How did you do it? And he said, I knew one of the things we'd really succeed, he said, the other day when we gave an innovation award to one of the cleaning teams. They had discovered and invented a different way of cleaning behind the development of the tunnel. They just made it, and that's all about devolving people, giving people control, and enabling them to achieve their ambition. So I think what's really, and that's at the heart of diversity, it's understanding people's differences, understanding their aspirations, and basically it comes down to great management. It's not much more, in a sense, than what everybody should be doing anyway. Great question, thank you so much indeed. You've so redeemed yourself. And closing, thank you very much indeed, is Julie Humphreys, who's Head of Diversity and Inclusion for UK, Europe and AIG.
So I've just torn up what everyone's going to say, because that was the call to action. I'm also conscious that it's nearly 6:30 and there's a vat of wine outside and you don't want to listen to me repeating exactly what they've just said. I'd just like to say thank you to Steffi and Alicia who put on this amazing event, so thank you very much. To everybody, you are so passionate and engaged and truthful and authentic, so thank you very much indeed. And finally, as part of the event, 4 of our senior executives have offered 4 mentoring sessions, and you're asked to put in your business card when you arrive this evening, so we're just going to do that draw now. Rachel King is what?
So Rachel King from Girl Guiding. Is she here? Hello. We will connect you with Andrew Tunnicliffe, and so if you want to introduce yourself to him after the session during the drinks, and make sure that you two exchange your contact details for one mentoring session. We have Ashad Aziz, a postgraduate MBA student from Coventry. Connect with Annika Symonds from EMEA, and she will offer a mentoring session to you. And we have Munaza Iqbal from Coventry University. You will win a mentoring session with Nerissa, with Romani O'Malley. That's another mentoring session that's on offer. And finally, we have Laura Shanhale from Aon. Laura? So please make sure you connect after the session, and good luck with your mentoring sessions. And thank you for coming. Please enjoy the drinks, and make sure you network with our fantastic speakers and amongst yourselves, and make sure you do follow those actions. And please, on your chairs, you have feedback forms to complete. It would really help if you completed them with just a few comments, just to make our future events even better. So thank you for coming, and see you later.
Wow. It's been a very beautiful afternoon right here at the Diversity Evolution. As usual, my name is Olayomi Koiki, bringing it to you as it's happening live here. Not too far from where I was yesterday at Liverpool Street, but this is a very magnificent building. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned one or two things. I hope you've picked up a lot of information. You can always go back and replay it and listen to it. Make sure the most important thing is you are not here, I am here, and that's the reason why Nigeria Diaspora, we've decided to transmit it live to you so that you can learn one or two things and you can improve yourself, and that is the most important thing. It is a very, very beautiful day. I have enjoyed it, and I hope you've enjoyed it yourself. In as much as there's so much discussion that have gone in, and I do hope you'll be able to learn one or two things from all the speakers today, so that you can be able to add value to what you do yourself. It is not the end of it. I'm heading down to the City Hall, where CB Connect is taking another event at 6:30 this evening. Join me if you can. Remember, you can change the way you think, and no one can do that for you. We can bring all this event to you, but if you're not making any use of it and helping yourself, then it's of no use. Again, I'm Olayomi Koiki. I'll be at the Nigerian High Commission tomorrow, where I'll be transmitting as well from 11 o'clock, and then I will be doing my own little bit on my own radio show, Niger Voices, where we're going to be discussing a lot of different things, but the most important thing is make sure you're part of it, and let's be have a good time. Thank you very much. It's time for me to do my own network as well. I've been standing on my feet for the last 3 hours trying to bring it to you live as it's happening, and I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you need our service, send me an email, yomi@nigeriadiaspora.net, or send me an inbox through the Facebook, or send me a message through my WhatsApp. A lot of people have got my number already. Thank you very much, and have a good evening. And see you later on at 6:30.